you guys doing today?
Good. You gonna scrub the streets today?
Yeah. Hopefully. Well, the rain may clean the streets on its own pretty quick.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, I'm gonna let Jake.
Great.
Yeah. So the first thing that I wanted to ask about, I wanted to get your thoughts on community mental health funding. We've had a lot of problems with that in West Michigan. So I guess what are your thoughts and what do you think some solutions are to help fix?
Well, I think there's a particular challenge in the organization serving this area, and so some of those is just continuing to work with them to figure out what those particular issues are. It's not been a huge statewide issue. We have made a major change in terms of how things are working, but long term, I think it could be a good thing. It's a different kind of funding model, but the idea is Healthy Michigan has actually provided a lot of great mental health services to people that didn't have that before. And I think we should view that overall as a positive. As part of that, there are resources to pay organizations to do good work. If you look at it, that really says, well, should you continue the previous funding the same way? Well, no, you should modify that. So how do we make the pie bigger so it can do better mental health, and at the same time make sure that the resources that we are providing are really being utilized the most effective way?
Okay.
So there's more discussion that needs to take place, and I think there could be more unique issues to the organization here. But I don't want to speculate. I mean, let's just work through it.
Okay.
If I can jump in just for a follow-up question, are there any discussions about perhaps doing something new to provide additional services for people? There's a shortage of beds at state facilities.
Yeah.
There's just a general shortage overall, even in the private sector. So are there any conversations that are happening to try to help incentivize the private sector to work with the public sector to be able to kind of expand the accessibility?
Yeah, I think we should be looking at that, not just in mental health, but also in, it's a related field, the whole treatment issue with opioids and addictions and such. So one of the things I think is a good idea that is being worked on is the concept of, do we have a good inventory? And can you do this online so people can access what beds are available, where they're at? Because if you can do that statewide analysis, then you can actually say, well, it's not meeting demand.
Right.
And where it's not meeting demand. And so part of it is, let's get all the facts on the table and let's do it in a thoughtful way. And it shouldn't be that hard to do. If you think about doing this inventory concept and then making it more real-time inventory and then doing analysis, because I think that would be an excellent improvement.
Okay, gotcha. So another follow-up question regarding community mental health. There's been a little bit of an argument between the prepaid and patient health plan in West Michigan and the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services over the amount of Medicaid payments and consumers. So I guess what are your thoughts on that?
Well, they need to work it out. I mean, that's the point, is hopefully they can come to some agreement as they go through what the facts are. Because again, the goal of the state is to provide good services to people. I will assume that the organization involved wants to do good things too. So if you have both people, hopefully in good faith, trying to work things out, there should be some conclusion there or some identification of why we got in this mess to begin with and how you sort it out.
Okay, gotcha. So switching topics, I wanted to ask about the Medicaid work and training rules legislation. What are your thoughts on that?
I think we need to be careful and thoughtful about putting those requirements in. And what I would say is I think there needs to be more discussion and there should be modifications to the current proposal out there, the current bill. Okay. I get concerned that there are people, I'll give you one illustration, is there are many people now that are sort of put into part-time work. So if you look at that work requirement at the 29-hour, I'm not sure it's right to tell people you need to get to that benchmark when a number of employers won't let them have that many hours. Because I don't want to discourage people, say, you didn't create this circumstance and you are working and you'd love to have more hours, but if your employers aren't letting you do it, why should you be disadvantaged in that particular case?
Yeah, do you think that touching on the drug testing aspect of that, of a lot of, the changes that are being considered, and having people drug tested in order to receive benefits. Do you think that might end up costing a lot more than what people realize? Because I think that people want to be sure that people who are receiving aid are drug free and are not abusing the system, but isn't that kind of a monumental cost for the state to take on?
Well, again, I view that as how far do you want to get involved in all these issues.
Right.
Again, if someone has a drug problem, we want to help them.
Right.
Not create more barriers in their life, because if you have a drug problem, you already have a significant uphill challenge in your life.
A lot of employers don't even do it because the cost involved is just astronomical. If you had to vet every single person who applies, then that becomes very difficult to maintain.
Well, again, this is where we need to improve. And it's not just opioids, but that's the biggest illustration of the crisis we're having.
Right.
And again, how do we get people treated? It's the same thing. It's like, historically, in many cases, if you go back to when I was young in the war on drugs, they would lock these people up and put them in prison.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a great outcome. I mean, these people have an addiction problem, and if they haven't harmed someone else, let's get them treatment.
We've had some people making the rounds at some of the township boards, and they're trying to get the municipalities to either have one stance or the other for recreational marijuana. We're obviously facing that in the fall to try to see what the people feel about it. And some people have been, when making their cases about approving it and legalizing it, they're saying that it's an alternative treatment to potential opioid prescriptions. And I was just wondering how you feel about that, because I know that that's a really controversial thing to kind of throw out there.
Yeah, I've had people try to link the two issues, and I don't like it.
Yeah, saying approve
it's
this
like,
because
somebody asked me that
and,
question in
right.
an event the other day, and I
Yeah.
said, okay, let's just hold on a second. We have an opioid crisis. Let's deal with that.
Yeah.
We need better treatment. The whole issue of recreational marijuana, I leave that to the citizens to decide.
Right.
If and when it ever shows up on the ballot or other courses generally, because as a governor, I put other things as higher priorities in terms of issues we can work on, some of the things we've talked about.
Right.
Let's deal with these things, because that's a very broad issue that has wide-reaching consequences that people have very strong feelings on.
Yeah,
We should let democracy work.
Do you have any personal opinion on whether or not the state should legalize it?
I have personal opinions, I just don't share them.
Okay, all right, fair enough.
Because, again, that's what I have my rights as a citizen.
Sure.
I separate that from my responsibilities as a governor.
Yep, you'll vote come election day.
Yep. I just voted yesterday, so.
Okay. So one of the last things we wanted to talk about, since it is your last Tulip Time as governor, what do you think your legacy as governor will be?
Actually, I don't even think about that. That's never been relevant to me. When I was running, I said I want to be judged on two things. One, did I do what I said I was going to do? And secondly, did I build a long-term foundation for success? It actually had nothing to do with me ever being governor. It's about, we were a broken state. And did we now have a foundation that people could build on for decades to come and make something exciting? And the good part is that the foundation's much stronger today than it was 8 years ago. I mean, just look at this community. It's wonderful that unemployment was over 9% when I became governor. Now it's just a little bit over 3%. And the biggest challenge now do you have a job, or is there a job? Now it's a question of, do you have all the skills and training you need to take that good, well-paying job? And that's a great situation to have, and I'm proud of how the state's done, and I want to see it continue. And this is a leadership area here in the Holland area and Ottawa County.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any plans for after office? I know you got a lot on your plate and you're still focusing on doing all the work up until the last day, but do you have any plans to continue some of the momentum that you've built over the past?
I want to run through the tape here, but it's one of those things. So I'll work hard through the last day in office. Beyond that, in terms of trying to be a governor after you're governor, that doesn't make sense. So the first thing is I'm going to do what Sue says, my wife, because I owe her some catch-up time and some quality things. Again, there are some public policy issues that I think are important that I may look to get involved with, not in the sense of getting in the middle of Michigan politics, but broader topics that I think are important, with the number one thing on my mind being civility, or the lack thereof.
We understand that a lot in the newspaper business.
Yeah.
We see a lot of that.
Yeah. Well, our country's at risk
Yeah.
if we don't get along better. And
Right.
I'm going to speak to that today
Yeah.
among the other topics that I'm going to cover, because we need to do better.
Yeah. We asked we put a call out on Facebook to ask some of the readers that, we're going to be sitting down with the governor. What are some of the things that you want to know about? So Jake has
Okay.
a couple of those.
Yeah. One of the questions one of the readers came up with was they wanted to ask us about progress as far as education goes. So
I'm assuming K through 12.
yeah, yep, K through 12 education. What I guess how do we keep moving education forward in Michigan?
Yeah, we need to keep working. We were behind, and we need to do better. And some of the things we've done, they take some time for the benefits to show up, but it's making sure we stay vigilant about following up to make sure we're measuring success appropriately and doing more actions. And one of the things we did several years ago was a big investment in early childhood education. We made the largest investment in the United States in terms of increasing opportunity to get early childhood, because that's where it begins. Beyond that, we did some legislation a couple years ago on pre-3 reading. Not just third grade reading, but encouraging reading through preschool through third grade and measuring results there. So we've done a lot in that kind of area. The other area that we focused in on a lot is career tech education, because there's a lot of great well-paying careers out there, either through intermediate school districts, or community colleges in particular. And so we've got career pathways. I announced the Marshall Plan for Talent. These are really innovative things that we need to do more on and to continue to grow those packages. One of the fun things we've done that this area's done really well is FIRST, the whole FIRST robotics thing and those
really
programs.
Popular here,
And I think that makes a difference in these young people's lives dramatically in terms of it encourages them to do a lot more STEM, to look at those fields. Women, it doubles their likelihood of looking at STEM if they're on the team. But it's more than that, because they learn team building skills, presentation skills, and you've done well in this area. You've got some wonderful teams, and so we're trying to continue to expand that so it's in all levels of schools and all school districts.
One of the things that I'm a little bit concerned about, because we've seen some of the test scores, is the reading proficiency. You brought up the third grade reading bill. Is there some concern about whether or not schools are going to get there by the time that they have to meet the requirements? Because we're probably averaging at about 60% right now, which is nowhere where we need to be. Is there any chatter about what we can do to try to get those numbers to where they need to be?
Well, again, I think we need urgency on this. I wouldn't want to just change it because we're not going to meet it.
Right.
So it's more, how do we make sure we're having the public dialogue? Because that's why I always like to tell people is when people want to talk about curriculum changes and other things, as I said, I don't want to lower the bar. We want to keep on raising the bar, but we need to do it in a thoughtful way so people feel they can achieve those results and move forward.
Right. What about the funding that you were talking about to better provide services for security and counselors to schools in the wake of the Parkland shooting? There's been a lot of discussion about how to make schools safer spaces. Do you think that has any chance of getting through? Yeah,
I think there's a couple phases I'm happy to share with you. I was just in Grand Rapids that we're doing the Homeland Security Conference, the Michigan Homeland Security Conference. So there's over 1,000 professionals talking about Homeland Security at the arena or the convention center right now. Right. And they had a whole session. I just spoke to probably several hundred school officials and school resource officers about that. And I think that my first wave proposal is very good because it's about helping identify troubled students, better access controls. What I would describe as the things that I think everyone should be able to agree on, that are good, solid things to do. And I believe that will get done. The House and the Senate have slightly different versions. They're both moving through the legislature, though. And I think we should be able to reconcile that, I would hope, this month or sometime in June and get that moving forward. But I'm also forming a task force of experts from all these different areas to continue that work to say, okay, this was just phase one. As you come up with ideas, please bring them out in the public. And in particular, I put off some of what would be described kind of as the politically controversial stuff that involve guns in some fashion directly. Right. Because I was open that my concern is if you try to do that all in one thing, all the discussion would get politically polarized.
Right, and then it tanks the stuff that is
and
doable.
the good stuff might get lost. Well, I appreciate you get that. I've actually had some people after me because I didn't put it right on the table, but I thought it was common sense to say, well, let's get kind of I view those things as even more important than that dialogue. And the reason I do is ultimately, if you look at all these situations, I believe all of them, they went back and found multiple warning signs. They could be different warning signs in each case, but the real question is, how do we identify these troubled kids? And I tell people there's not one solution to that, and more likely it's going to be other kids spotting it first. And so how do we create an environment where kids can come forward? That's where we have okay to say, but how do we create mechanisms of not just them coming forward, but who they go to knows who to give it to next, and how to get it to ultimately the right person that's the right listener, or the person with the skills to intervene appropriately before something negative happens. Because I don't view it as just the active shooter. This person's likely to be a suicide risk, a bully or bullied. I mean, they need help.
I think we had one other reader question.
Yeah, the other question they wanted to ask: how do we ensure that we have safe drinking water in Flint and throughout the state going forward?
Well, the drinking water in Flint for the last 22 months is tested better than the federal standards require by a significant margin. Actually, it's better than many other places in the country. That needs to continue. Flint is now running their own water system, but to be helpful, we're continuing to provide filters and cartridges to the degree someone has concern. But it's a broader issue too, and so we're proposing new rules for the lead and copper rule. The federal government hasn't done anything with this rule for years and years, and they've been required to. They keep on putting it off. We're moving forward in Michigan with tougher standards, which I think will be very helpful on the lead and copper side. And then we have all these issues with PFAS that's starting to come up, a new contaminant that, to be open, I believe Michigan's a leader in terms of being proactive about identifying the issue, doing testing, trying to do interventions to address this topic in some fashion, because hopefully we learn some lessons from Flint that we can apply in other areas to be a leader.
Well, I know that we're just about wrapping up, so is there anything that you would like to say to your citizens in West Michigan directly?
Yeah. Well, it's great to be here. I mean, well, it's Tulip Time.
Yeah.
Come on.
It's the most wonderful time
Yeah,
of
this
year.
is a wonderful time of year. This is a fabulous thing. I mean, I'm proud that I'm 8 for 8.
Yeah, yeah.
And
even with your injury and everything, you still showed up?
Yeah. So, because this is a wonderful part of Michigan doing great things. And I think people should be proud. And it's a great attraction for people around the world to come participate in. The funny part is I was just in the Netherlands recently. And I bring greetings from Ambassador Hoekstra and Diane. They asked me to pass that on. But we're doing some cool work with the country of the Netherlands now. We signed an agreement between a national government and Michigan to do work on autonomous and connected vehicles. So isn't that exciting to see? I mean, the historical heritage here is one thing, but it actually has led to a continuing relationship and dialogue, and that's good for all of us.
Yep. Well, great. Well, thank you so much for speaking with us,
Happy
taking
to.
the time. I appreciate it. I know it's a really busy day.
Oh, sorry I couldn't make it over.
Oh, it's okay.
In the past, I've made it over to your offices.
You've seen our renovated building, haven't you, since we moved back into this space?
Oh.
It doesn't look terrible anymore.
Yeah, you had a good view, but
I think that we've been there for about 18 months now. I can't remember if you came last year or not.
I'm trying to remember.
Yeah.
But
now they're
I do remember the old days. It didn't need
on
some
both
work.
sides of us. We look like this tiny little building.
But you had a great location.
Yeah. Well, I look forward to seeing. Are you going to wear your Dutch finery?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I look
so
forward
I'll
to
do the luncheon and then change.
Yeah. There you go. All right.